Welcome back, CCH Trying family, to week 2. Count it, 2 of the summer reading series. I am incredibly excited to be yapping at you guys through the screen because it has been 2 weeks since we've been together on the beautiful campus of Trying University. And I definitely am ready to be back. Have fun, eat some pancakes, have some shenanigans with you guys. But for today, the screen's going to have to do. I know it's hard, but it's going to be okay. The last 2 weeks, and for the remainder of the summer, I'm working at Worldwide Auctioneers, which is a collector car auction company in Auburn, Indiana. Basically, all I'm doing is meeting, greeting, talking, and having a great time with people, and get to travel a bunch and just have a great time all about cars. But it's been super cool. For example, when this airs Friday, today, I'll be in Indianapolis working. I'll be there for the weekend, which is so fun to be able to travel and work. But I'm having a great time, but I still miss you guys a lot. In the event that you don't know what book we're about to cover, despite the fact that it's in the caption and you probably got a notification about it, we are reading the wonderful book of Amos. Now, if you don't have your bookmark, that's A-okay. If you lost it, that's fine. If you didn't get one, it's Jordan's fault. Either way, it's all right. It'll probably be on the app. It'll probably show up before this video. It'll probably be on the Instagram. And if not, you have this video to tell you, and then you can pick it up and figure out along the way. It'll be just fine. It's not too late. If you haven't read the Bible Project video, give this a pause and go and watch that. It's super good. Apparently, the book is pronounced Amos, not Amos, which I never understood because I don't understand how an O sounds like that. But it does. The video told me so, and now I'm telling it. So if you think I sound weird, take it up with them and with Lance. So the book of Amos, it's super good. If you haven't read it, definitely stop this. Go give that a read. It's so good. There's so many things that I can't talk about that I think they're so powerful, and I would love to cover, but this video is probably going to be too long anyways, so you can take that up with Jordan. I'm going to tell you, I think just the theme for this book is just the universal justice of God. And it is so cool to be able to read this because I think of all the characteristics of God, we see his love, his mercy, his grace, just these wonderful characters of God. I think his justice is the one that we overlook the most, but it's definitely one that is incredibly prevalent in his character. And I think this book just throws that all together and just throws it right at you, which is just so powerful. It's really heavy, but it's super good. I'm just going to talk about some things that kind of stood out to me that I thought were really cool, practical applications. I don't know. We're going to see. We're going to do it together. But we're going to start at the end of chapter 2. Before this, we see all these different nations that are going to be judged by God and why they're going to be judged by God. And the last one that is stated is Israel, God's chosen people, and it is the longest. From chapter 2, verse 6 to the end of the book is basically how why they're being judged, what that's going to look like, and what that's going to look like. And then just some redemption for the last 5 verses, which is crazy. So if we look at why Israel's being judged, I think that's super powerful and super cool because it is very applicable to today's world. So as I read these, just listen to them and think about today, okay? Israel is being judged because they sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. They trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and turn aside from the afflicted. A man and his father enter the same woman so that God's holy name may be profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge. In the house of God, they drink the wine of those who they find. As we look at this, the Israelites are on this track that is not where God called them to be. And the Old Testament is very law. New Testament has love. We'll talk about that in a second. But just like this law of these things that God's telling them to do, and they are way over here. They're in these materialists. They're worshiping these idols. Their lives are consumed by money and by sex and just not the things that God are calling them to. And I think if we look at today's current world, this has not changed. Not just for the Israelites, but for the whole planet. Just the microscope of materialism is so strong in today's world. I think that's something that's so cool as we continue to read this book and we think, oh, that's the Old Testament, that happened such a long time ago, and God's wrath is different for them than it is for us. But if we really look at this, this is very, very applicable to us today. The materialism in the world, the push for money, the push for sex, the push for all these things that, the world says, this is going to fill you, this is going to bring you peace, this is going to bring you joy, this is going to bring you happiness. Whereas God's saying, no, that's not true. I've showed you this. This is what you know, but you're still following this way. I'm going to punish you for that. Which is a little but we'll see that in a second. But I think this is just so cool to read this and realize that we are today still the Israelites. It is so hard for us to continue to follow and pursue God despite how prevalent he's been. It's so easy to follow the wrong track. Which leads us into the end of chapter 2 and kind of the middle-ish of chapter 4. And in these places, God kind of tells Israel, like, I have showed myself to you in many different ways, and yet you still did not return to me and return to the Father. I think this is super cool. In chapter 2, it speaks more to like the blessings that God gives. He says, Israel, I delivered you from Egypt. I led you through the desert for 40 years. I allowed you to take the promised land. I've done all these great things for you. And he's done far more than that, but that's the one that was listed in the book. And it's just God's like, oh, I've given you all these things. I've given you all these blessings. And yet you still turn and worship these idols. You still worship this money. You still worship these things that are not of me and not what I command of you. And the Israelites still don't follow God. And then in chapter 4, he kind of gives them a different reason to call him. As opposed to blessing him, he almost gives them, what they deserve, a little bit of judgment. And God says, I pick what cities get rain. I can choose that because I am the God of the world. And, these 2 or 3 cities, they didn't get any rain. So I had to travel to another just to get a drink of water, and yet they were still not satisfied. And God's saying, even when I did this to you, you still didn't turn to me. You did this on your own. You figured it out on your own. When all you had to do was come and ask me, and I would have given it to you. God's saying, even just anything that I could do, I tried to reach you in every way that I could, and you still just didn't come back to me. And then we get to this judgment, which I think is so powerful, and just this end of the book is so heavy, but so, so good. I said it before, and I think at Passion, I believe it was Jackie Hill Perry talked about it, and just like, I think the thing that we are most depleted of today is a fear of God, which is crazy to think about. Like, I don't want to be scared. That's no fun. But we have far more fear in these earthly things that are fake or we've never heard of, or, a shadow that I think is in my room, but we don't have this fear and this reverence for God. And I think this brings that up. I know that I felt this, and I would highly encourage you to just read this whole book because I can't talk about all of it. I'm going to keep saying that because it's so true. But the title of this next section in chapter 5 is like, let justice roll down, which sounds like, like here we go. Like it's time to buckle up. We thought the beginning was bad. It's going to keep gearing up. It's going to crescendo into just this side of God that we haven't seen and that we haven't learned to have a reverence for, have an appreciation for, and have a fear of, a healthy fear, obviously. But as we look at chapter 5, verses 21 to 24, this was crazy to me to read this. It says, I despise your feasts, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Peace offerings of your fattened animals, I will not look upon them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. To the melody of your harp, I will not listen. But let justice roll down on you like water, and let righteousness fall like an ever-flowing stream. In this, we see God is fully aware of what the Israelites are doing. God's called them to do this, and yet they're going this way. They're following the world. They're worshiping these idols. They're living this materialistic life and beating on the poor and, just wicked imagery of what they're doing wrong. And yet at the same time, they're trying to worship God and give him offerings and have these feasts in his name. And God is fully aware of what is going on. And he says, there is by no means will I accept these fake, ill-hearted, discontent things that you are giving to me, because that is not where your heart is. And I can see straight through that. Take it away from me. And this, reading this is kind of fear-striking for me, and I think it should be for all of us, because we are very aware when we are sinning. God has given us this Holy Spirit. He's given us guilt. He's given us all these things. So we know when that's going on in our lives. And yet sometimes we still abide in that sin and try to abide in God at the same time. But that's not something we can do. Obviously, we can't live a perfect life. We're set to strive for that. I don't think we can, but in Jesus, we can come as close as possible. But, these Israelites are just so far down this path, and yet they're still trying to touch back into what God has called them to do so that they can be saved and that they won't be judged the same way their enemies will be judged, or maybe not even judged at all. But God is fully aware, and he is denying what they're giving him. Whoa. I mean, to me, that's like, I started reading this and I was like, I have never really seen this side of God. I don't think we really see this side a whole lot. And then we go to chapter 9, and I think this is where it's just amplified. 7 through 9, I'd love to talk about that. A little thing, Amos pleads with God. God shows him these visions, and he tells God to please forgive him. He tells him to please just stop, please cease. And God says it will not be so. Like, like what does God have in store for these people? And if we go to chapter 9, it starts at verse 1. I'm going to read this, and then I'll talk a little more, and then we'll be done. Don't worry, Jordan, it's almost over. It starts with, shake the capitals and thresholds, shatter them on the heads of all the people. Those who are left I will kill with the sword. None shall flee, none shall escape. If they dig into Sheol, I think that's how it's pronounced, it's considered the abode of the dead. From there shall my hand take them. If they climb up to heaven, from there I shall bring them down. If they hide themselves on top of Carmel, from there I shall search them out and take them. If they hide from my sight at the bottom of the sea, there I will command the serpent, and it shall bite them. If they go in captivity by their enemies, there I will command the sword, it shall kill them. I will fix my eyes upon them for evil and not for good. I think reading this is crazy. We never see the side of God. We never do. I mean, we always think of God as just, merciful and loving, and, just this peace that he can give us. And we never remember just this judgment and this righteousness and just this justness of who he is. And this depicts that greatly. He says, none shall flee, none shall escape from the wrath of God. Earlier it talks about how the strong will be weak and God will overtake them. The fast will be slow and they cannot escape. But there is no escaping the judgment of God. It talks about, woe is to you who, praise on the day of the Lord. Do you not know what that will look like? It is a day of darkness, not a day of light. And I think we have this misconception, and the Israelites had the same misconception too. And it's just this fear and this reverence for God is not something that I feel like I ever had. And I think if you ever want that, you got to read this book. It is so good. And then at the end, the last 4 verses, it talks about, the redemption that is going to be brought up through God's people, and not just his people, but those who call upon his name. And we see this redemption as Jesus, which is so cool to know that, Jesus can save us. And as we look at this Old Testament, it was all like law. We see the law of God, but in the New Testament, we get to see kind of more just the love of Jesus, which is so just great. And there's just so many good things in this book. I think it applies to us today so well. And as we look at the Bible, we think, that's in the past a lot of times, or, that was old things that doesn't apply to us now, or the minor prophets, which hardly anybody reads. I bet if I asked you the order, you couldn't tell me. I couldn't tell you. And yet it still applies to us today. The truth that is in it still applies to us today. There will be a judgment. There will be a day when we answer to God, and his wrath is going to come. We are sinful and we are direct opposite of who God is, and he can't abide in that. He gave us Jesus to help surpass that, and through Jesus we can attain that. But there will be this wrath of God, and I think that's something that we overlook so often. I think this book does such a good job of bringing that to light. I think that's so cool. It is very heavy, but I think it's needed, and it's in there for a reason. The book of Amos was pretty wicked to read. That's the main things that I pointed out. There are so many more, but I just don't have time to tell you, but that's okay. This was probably long anyways, but it was a pleasure talking to you guys through this camera. I truly enjoyed it. Next week, 1 Timothy. If you don't have your bookmark, I'm telling you now. So you better start reading, better start meditating, take some notes. It helps. It helped me. I feel like I retained so much more just jotting down notes as I was reading. Super powerful to do. But that's all I have for you this week, guys. It's been a pleasure. I hope you're having a splendid summer. I can't wait to see you all again. And we'll see you next year.